time.
This is Gail Morgan welcoming you to the Libertarian Counterpoint. Now, your host, James Just.
And thank you for joining me today. With me is Richard. And gentlemen, just to kind of as an example of how quickly Afghanistan disintegrated, there's a story out here that the Afghan president fled the country essentially over the lunch break. His staff came back and wondered where he was because they essentially left over the lunch break. That's how quickly this whole Afghan thing disintegrated and how just out of control that whole evacuation and moving out of Afghanistan was. I think we all here agree that ending the war is a good thing, but the way they have handled the end of this war has been absolutely abysmal. It's that. I'm not a military person, so maybe I'm out of my depth here. So, John, can you give us a hand here?
No, I would. There's a word, cluster is the first part of it, and the second part of it, anybody can fill in, is a good description of the withdrawal. It looks to me like, basically the U.S. toward the end of the war, with the combination of special ops troops and the Air Force, had eliminated the Taliban's ability to engage in any major warfare, because the minute they showed themselves, they would destroy them. So I think what happened was the plans that the Afghan military had involved some U.S. advisors and some air support. And so I think they went whoop and pulled that out of there. And then they just said, you're on your own, and didn't have it. It looks to me as if this might be the most poorly planned piece of U.S. military tactics and strategy since the Bay of Pigs and in Cuba. It's bad, and as you dive deeper and deeper into it, we'll never know, if there was an orderly plan for getting out of there and it was just ignored, or if they planned to have it this bad. But I can't believe that this was the result of a whole lot of planning. I think somebody just said, "Let's get out of there," and we're going to go, and we should have never been in there in the first place. And as a libertarian, I'd have to say that. But and again, as usual, we went in somewhere and did more harm than good, and let rival factions in there use our airstrikes to take their enemies out, and siphoned off probably $1 trillion in corruption money, and now we're leaving. So anyway.
Yeah, I'm no military strategist, but I certainly have a little bit of common sense. And if you're going to retreat, and that's what this was, it was a retreat, you should do it in an orderly and sensible fashion. And that would mean you get all of the embassy personnel, all of the U.S. citizens, and all of the Afghans that have been supporting us for these last 20 years, get them out if they want to leave first, before you empty Bagram Air Force Base, before you remove the military. You remove the military last. That's just common sense. They did it backwards. And
yeah.
That's all you can say. They could pick the military. They emptied Bagram first, and then they sent the rest of the military home, and then they said, okay, you're on to the Afghan government. You're on your own, and the Afghan president said, "Yeah, I don't think so. I'm out of here," which was exactly what he should have done, because the last time we left a Western-supported Afghan government to the tender mercies of the Taliban, the then president was hung from a stop sign or a traffic light, and the current president said, "No, I don't think I want to do that." So he got out of there, which was a sensible thing to do, but it was not sensible for us to be there in the first place. That's the bottom line. Yeah. We have to give kudos to Biden for having the courage or the dim-wittedness, I'm not sure which, to get out And, he at least was better than Obama, better than Bush, better than his predecessors that got us in there in the first place. But that's not saying a whole heck of a lot.
No, they're all bad. And when there's something in the military. There's different kinds of retreats. There's an orderly retreat, a retreat under fire, a hasty retreat. I mean, they teach these things because, sometimes you're going to have to retreat. And this was a cluster, not a cluster bomb, a cluster, fill in the rest. And I'm not a big fan of some of these, jingoistic things like National Review and stuff. But I think they're pretty much right in saying that, Secretary of Defense should get fired. The Chief of Staff should get fired. Whoever's running the theater should get fired. But what's worse than that is not what little credibility the United States had for even remotely telling the truth to people is certainly out the window, because apparently our we didn't even inform the Brits, and they were our kind of staunchest allies in trying to do whatever it was misguided attempts we were trying to do. So they were left holding the bag. And then all these NGOs that are there are actually trying to help people, and on and on and on and on. So, latest figures, they've airlifted out like 130,000 Afghanis, but there's still, Brits and Americans and Swiss and all sorts of people cut off, and they're really left to the good graces of the Taliban. And quite frankly, they don't have any good graces. So, anyway, I think we beat this to death. But
I would say that what you're talking about there, John, is probably the saving grace. It's demonstrated unequivocally that to the American people that the American government are liars. They've been lying about Afghanistan for 20 years, and the obvious question is, what else are they lying about? Which probably brings us to our next topic.
Yeah, it'll bring us to the next topic, but I do have one thing I want to end on this with. Is that it surprises me that they didn't understand what was going to happen. They knew that the Taliban, that the Afghan military wasn't going to hold up, but they just thought they'd hold up longer. But if you're not there to back them up, why would they just not leave? Why wouldn't they do exactly what the Afghan president do and put their weapons down and go off into the mountains or wherever they're going to go? It boggles my mind that this thought process that these military leaders or political leaders or whoever thought this thing or didn't think this thing through was thinking. It's just completely mind-boggling.
Well, I agree with Richard that anytime the lunacy and ineffectiveness and obvious backhanded double dealing of our wonderful, especially federal government, and might even be more evil California government's exposed, it's a good thing. I just hate that so many people are going to lose their lives and have lost their lives to learn this lesson.
Yeah, I think I looked it up yesterday. It was 778 now California service members who have lost their lives since 9/11 in wars. And talk about an explosion of, incompetence, an explosion of geoforce warrants that have threatened our privacy. The government has been asking Google and the various cell phone companies to get cell phone records, not just of individual people, of essentially mass surveillance. They ask for all the data. It's actually becoming quite scary for those of us who are civil libertarian, especially when you consider all the various mandates and everything else that everybody's talking about. This kind of power we are giving to the government is a bit on the disturbing side, shall we say.
Absolutely agree. And I'm not very techy, but the problem with the geofencing is what the government does. And by the way, for our viewers, apparently between 2019 and 2020, the number of warrants asked for, these geofencing warrants, went up tenfold. And they're not, when they do geofencing, if you're into marketing, means people within a certain geographic sphere. So the government's not asking for access to one individual's phone records or GPS data or all the rest of that, which is what warrants are supposed to be for, one individual. They're asking for somewhere, in some cases, up to 10,000 people. They want to know who was at this riot And there are a couple of states, some jingoistic states, I forget which ones, which are actually trying to pass legislation that says if you're at a riot, then it's a felony, and anybody there is guilty of, But suppose you go to a peaceful demonstration, it turns into a felony. So anyway, I think this isn't the anarchist cookbook show, but I think you can simply turn your cell phone off. And if you go somewhere and don't want to be tracked, and then when you leave that area, turn it back on. So there's a pretty simple solution. But everybody's so camera happy and text happy and YouTube happy and Facebook happy that while riots are going on, as happened in our nation's swamp, I don't want to call it the capital anymore, in the swamp, people were, busy taking selfies of themselves while they're, breaking and entering. So, but it's dangerous because the courts aren't stopping this. And what we know is, from looking at ecology law and everything else, is that governments and government agencies will violate the law repeatedly until somebody forces them to stop. And somebody needs to force these people to stop this, because it's patently unconstitutional, and it's overreach at its highest, and I'm done.
Yeah, I mean, it's a clear violation of the Fourth Amendment. Unreasonable search. Just because you happen to be in a given area doesn't mean that you're guilty of anything, or even should be suspected of anything. But nevertheless, the government is saying we want to search your phone or any other communications device. I think the correct word is scary.
Yeah, it's scary. You can call it Orwellian if you want to get put a little something on it. Word I'm looking for isn't coming to my mind. But it is. We're heading in a direction where our individual rights, our rights as human beings, are continually being more and more violated. But the FBI has found scant evidence that the Capitol attack was coordinated, which undercuts the notion of a insurrection. If there's no coordination, there's no insurrection. It can be a riot. It can be a breaking and entering, as John was talking about, and the people involved should be dealt with. But this notion that it was a insurrection was always kind of goofy to me. And this FBI report actually kind of proves the whole notion that if you don't have coordination, you cannot have an insurrection.
One thing that we can use as a really bad example. We talked about Afghanistan earlier and how poorly organized it was. The what do they call it? The insurrection. I love the news media. The large demonstration that was almost totally peaceful, except for the last little bit of it. A
fiery but mostly peaceful protest. Yeah, that's it.
One more time.
A fiery but mostly peaceful protest. That's what they called the Kenosha, the riots in the summer.
And then some idiots broke and entered, and I would love to see videotape to see if they actually broke to enter or if they were let in, and which side let them in. Well, that's a whole different show. And they could organize that, and some estimates are there were nearly 1 million people there, and organize that in a couple of days. But we knew we were going to leave Afghanistan. Our government's in charge of leaving Afghanistan and should have had plans in place for years and managed to do what they're doing. So, citizenry left to their own devices, government. I know it's a bad example, but but the idea that, this constant cooking up the fear-mongering tactics in the lamestream media, like the Clinton News Network and all the rest of that there was somebody high up in the United States government who was pulling the strings to, stop democracy in action and blah, 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 blah. I mean, those people couldn't keep a freaking secret if their lives depended on it.
Yeah, I think the fact that some of the quote-unquote leaders were wearing Hagar the Horrible costumes pretty much says it all. It was a bunch of idiots cheer-led by another idiot by the name of Donald Trump.
Yeah. Insurrections don't take selfies. You don't take time and take selfies during an insurrection. You get your job, that task done. The whole notion that it was an insurrection was always goofy. Now there's proof that there was never any real evidence for it. They just wanted it to be, so therefore it came into be. And it's still a serious thing. I don't want to, we're not downplaying the event, but let's not overplay the event either. And I think that's kind of the take on that. All right, so we'll move on again here. The White House is calling for local eviction moratoriums after the Supreme Court struck down again their attempts at a moratorium. Now, the Supreme Court told them they can't do this without congressional approval. They went and deliberately do it anyway. So they've deliberately violated the Constitution, and with paying no price. Yet if I park in front of my house because I don't have the most recent sticker, I get a parking ticket and pay a higher price than these guys do for deliberately violating the Constitution. I personally find that very frustrating. When they deliberately violate the Constitution, pay no price at all, and yet I have $60 for parking in front of my house. It's frustrating as heck.
Let me throw something in here. So it's actually worse because they reported that President Biden and not Don Shillelagh, I mean whoever it is that's in charge of HUD and all these other alphabet agencies actually said and reached out and said, we want states and localities to pass legislation to stop this, because it's not right that people get evicted until they've been able to apply for some more giveaway money to cover their mortgage or their rent. Now, let's just say it was a different law that was overturned, or not one that was overturned. Let's say the last president got on TV and said the Supreme Court keeps upholding Roe v. Wade. What I want you to do, states and localities and communities, is to go out and write local legislation and state laws that violate the Supreme Court on this one. Because what they're doing is egregious and wrong, because they're killing fetuses, which are human beings.
Well, in fact, that's happened.
Well, what would the press do? What would the press do?
Well, we're seeing it happen. It happened in real life.
I mean, what I'm saying is the difference in reporting between those two events.
Yeah,
it was on the one hand a horrible overreach by a totalitarian dictator, populist, da 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 da. Now, the lamestream press is quiet.
Well, no, we're seeing your analogy happen in real time in Texas. Yeah. Texas passed a law that says that you can't have an abortion prior to or after a heartbeat is detected in the fetus, which gives about a 2-week window between when a woman discovers she's pregnant and before an abortion is made illegal. And that's the state legislature of Texas telling the Roe v. Wade Supreme Court to go to in a southerly direction. And the mainstream press, the establishment media, is decrying it. Meanwhile, the establishment media is crying crocodile tears for all of these poor folks that are going to be, after these many, many months, evicted from their homes that they haven't been paying rent on for a long time. Now, in defense of the folks who can't pay the rent, most of them, or not most of them, but certainly a large percentage of them, can't pay the rent because their jobs were destroyed by the government with all of the lockdowns. It was the government causing the problem from the get.
No, I agree and with you on that one, Richard. That the people said because of the pandemic, because of the pandemic. No, it's because of the panic-demic. The heavy-fisted, and hopefully we have time to go into this, completely inefficient, totally unnecessary lockdowns that did more harm than good, and the printing of I don't know, I can't even imagine a stack of 100 bills that high, probably reached to the moon, of money to make up for the fact that they screwed this one up so bad. They tried to patch it by printing money. So you're absolutely right that the reason a lot of these people can't pay their rent or their mortgage is because of government action. And quite frankly, as Americans are now learning to do, and the rest of the world has done, Italy's a great example. They realized that they didn't have to pay their student loan, and they didn't have to pay their rents, and the unemployment insurance they got, unlike the job they used to have, is not taxable. A lot of that money went right into the stock market. I mean, the American people took a look around and said, no, I don't think I'll pay my rent or my mortgage, and I don't think I'm going to pay my student loan, and I'm going to take this more money than I've ever had and put it in the bank. But what they forget is that they're still responsible for that mortgage payment, and they're still responsible for that student loan payment. But they took it
Theoretically.
Well, theoretically responsible, John. But if the government gives them has them a check to pay it off, how responsible are they?
Yeah.
And not all these things are created equal.
You get into the student loan thing. I mean, the reason student loans are so horrendous is because government has been encouraging student loans for overpriced college for decades now. And you see the highest inflation in the areas that the government is most strongly involved in, and those are education, healthcare, and military spending.
And housing.
Wait, sorry, there was supposed to be 3 fingers on there, not just one. Sorry, folks. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So we're going to move on for you, John, so we can get in these last couple topics here for you. The evidence supporting mask mandates in schools is weaker than the mandators kind of pretend. Well, if you actually look at Sweden, they never mask their schools, they never close their schools, and they are now just kind of have a very low case rate. And they haven't had a death in like 2 weeks. But their question is they never mandated anything. They asked people to take care of themselves, and they went kind of working through the pandemic while the rest of us are sitting here panicked in our homes. They're out having normal lives. And the evidence is starting to back this up, but the media isn't going to tell us. And I think that's the part that's actually the most interesting.
Well, we've kind of beat the COVID thing to death, but since it's causing such havoc, maybe it's worth spending a little bit more time on the mask. The experts in basically dealing with epidemics developed a process over the last 100 years that works. And then when this COVID thing happened, they threw everything out the window and let people who didn't know what they're doing take charge. And they on and on and on. There's evidence from everywhere, from the UK, from Florida, from France, from the Dutch countries, from Sweden, and everything else, that kids rarely catch this thing. If they do catch it, they rarely get ill. There's no reason at all for them to be masked, but they're in school. But there are huge reasons for them not to be masked and in school. And those are the fact that they didn't get any kind of education at all when they were cowering in their homes. They got sicker in their homes because that's where most of the transmission of this virus took place, not in public places, but in homes. And the ill effects on their education, that some people will never catch up, their mental health, the missed cancer screenings, and on and on. I could list things until we're way over time on the show. This is lunacy, and the rest of the world has proven it's lunacy. But the minute you mention not sending a kid to school in a mask here, you're I don't know, what are you? You're crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. The information you sent around before the show, James, was a BBC story, British Broadcasting Company. And about this establishment, European establishment, as you can get, which takes CDC figures and demonstrates unequivocally that the figures do not support masking. Something like 0.002% of kids get a fatal case of COVID. That's 2 out of 1,000. That's probably, I don't know what the exact figures are, but probably less lethal than the common ordinary flu or other childhood maladies. So, the idea that you have to mask up kids, it's just silly. I mean, I don't have any problem with parents telling their kids you're going to mask up just to be on the safe side. But I don't think it should be a government mandate that requires that. One of the unforeseen good consequences of the lockdown is that not as many kids went to public or government schools. More and more kids are getting homeschooled, which is actually a good thing. Hopefully, it'll continue. As the use of the pandemic to restrict liberty by politicians continues apace, which I'm sure it will. I don't think this is going to die anytime soon. The other point I'd like to make is that natural immunity or immunity is actually better, and that's what the BBC article also said. That natural immunity confers immunity, and I'm not a scientist, so I can't exactly explain it, but it makes possible a broader immunity than the vaccines do. And now, that's not an argument against vaccines. I got the vaccine. I'll get the third one when it's available because it provides some immunity. But had I, and I didn't get COVID, which is lucky, but had I gotten COVID, I'd get the vaccine on top of that because the more immunity, the better, as far as I'm concerned. But the fact that we're denying kids the opportunity, and I say this, I'm somewhat reluctant to use that word, but the less cases the kids have of getting COVID or any other coronavirus flu-like disease, the less chance their immune systems have to build up immunity for all of the various variants of coronavirus and flu and all of the other viral infections that they can get over a lifetime. There's a reason why kids get a whole lot more colds than adults do. It's because they are not immune to as many things as adults are. We get, many flu and cold viruses over a lifetime, and we get a lot fewer cases of flu as we get older. That's because we're more immune because we've been exposed to more stuff. So exposure is actually within reason is beneficial.
Mm-hmm. And I want to add to what Richard said. I absolutely.
You got 1 minute, John.
The reason I like that article so much was that I can't imagine a mainstream U.S. media presenting a story like that, where they talked about, should we inoculate the kids or not? BBC says that 50% approximately of kids have already been exposed and had a mild case, so it's probably not necessary. And so they had a reasoned open discussion. We don't have those in this country anymore, especially not on the mainstream media. It's a strident trumpet voicing one opinion. There is no expert A versus expert B having a reasoned discussion. But, they do that in other parts of the world. We used to do that here. I'd like to see more of it.
John, we do have those reasonable discussions here, and then we are out of time for today. Thank you both for joining me. Thank you for joining us, and catch us next week. Thank you, and please remember to love everybody.
Thank you, James.
Thank you, James.